The Garmin Venu was originally released 4 years ago alongside the Vivo Active 4 and was like its counterpart with an AMOLED display. In fact, it was also Garmin's first ever AMOLED watch. At that time, AMOLED displays were not that popular, especially among sports watches, so this is why the Venu was overshadowed by the Vivo Active 4 for a long time. But these types of displays have developed and improved a lot and are becoming increasingly popular among athletes as well. The Venu 2 was therefore already one of the most popular Garmin watches, and the Venu 2 Plus with its integrated voice assistant finally stepped out of the shadow of the Vivo Active watches. Now, the Venu 3 and Vivo Active 5 are two new additions to this family of watches, and things have changed because now it's the Venu 3 that is the new flagship model and is supposed to be Garmin's best ever fitness smartwatch. So as always, I was very excited to take the watch through its paces, which I did by wearing it for all of my running, cycling, swimming and gym sessions, and just by wearing it 24/7 for the last couple of weeks. In this video we will discuss all the pros and the cons of the watch so that you know whether it's the right choice for you. So let's get started. Just looking at the watch from the outside, the Venu 3 fits in very well with its predecessors. Just like the Venu 2, the watch is available in two different versions, with the larger Venu 3, which I also have here, being mini smaller than the Venu 2 with a case diameter of 45mm and also slightly narrower at 12mm, while the smaller Venu 3S is slightly larger than the Venu 2S at 41mm but also slightly narrower at 12mm as well. However, there is not too much of a difference in terms of the dimensions. And the same also applies for the weight. The Venu 3 comes in at 46 grams with the included silicone strap, which is 3 grams lighter than its predecessor, while the smaller Venu 3S is just under 2 grams heavier than the Venu 2S at 40 grams, but as I said, these differences aren't really noticeable at all. As usual, the watch is mostly made of plastic, which is one of the main reasons for the light weight. As a result, the watch fits very comfortably on the wrist and didn't really annoy me during the day or at night, which has already been the case with some other heavier, bigger watches in the past. The Venu 3 takes a completely different approach than, for example, Garmin's outer watches such as the Phoenix or Epix, which use stainless steel or titanium to make them as robust as possible, but also make them pretty heavy. Unlike these watches, the Venu 3 does not use sapphire glass, but rather the somewhat less break and scratch resistant Gorilla Glass. However, this is more than sufficient for the vast majority of cases, and as I said, the Garmin Venu 3 is not made for these extreme rough outdoor conditions, but more like for the 24/7 daily use. In return, I also find that it once again comes with a really decent design. It is not completely made of plastic, the bezel is made of stainless steel, which gives it a very elegant look. It does not look like a classic sports watch, like for example the Phoenix 7, but rather like a fitness smartwatch. As I said, it also features a colorful AMOLED display like its predecessors, which is very different from the MIP displays usually found on sports watches. Because AMOLED displays are much brighter, more colorful and with higher contrasts, and overall they are simply much more beautiful to look at than the transflective MIP displays. They used to be almost impossible to read in the sun, but that's not anymore. So the Venu 3 is very easy to read in all conditions according to my experience. And even though the watch has become slightly smaller, the display is now even significantly larger, at 1.4 inches as opposed to the 1.3 inches of the Venu 2. And with a resolution of 454x454 pixels, this watch, alongside the Forerunner 965, now offers the best resolution of all the Garmin watches. The display is really crisp and it's just fun to look at in my opinion. The battery life of AMOLED displays is also getting significantly better, and the Venu 3 now has the best battery life of all the Venu watches. And this is what we'll take a look at now. For a long time, the battery life was one of the biggest drawbacks of AMOLED displays in general, because this type of display technology drains the battery much more than, for example, transflective MIP displays. But in this regard, they have also improved a lot, and just looking at the specs, the Venu 3 actually has some impressive battery life numbers. In smartwatch mode, meaning just the normal day-to-day usage, it lasts up to 14 days and even up to 26 days in its battery saving mode. Usually the screen turns off when you're not using the watch and then turns back on as soon as you turn your wrist, press a button or tap the screen. Besides that, there is also an always on mode where the screen does not turn off when not in use, but only dims. Using this mode, the battery life is reduced from up to 14 to up to 5 days. In GPS mode, so while recording a workout, the Venu 3 lasts up to 26 hours, and even when using all GPS systems and playing music throughout, it's still 11 hours. So this watch has a better battery life than the Venu 2 or the Venu 2 Plus, well, at least on paper. So let's take a look at how well it really performs in real life. On this day I charged the watch after breakfast and then started with 100%, then I went for a run for a good half hour, after which it was still 97%. Next I went to the gym for 45 minutes, the battery level after that was 94%. With that my sports program was done for the day, but I still did a lot of things with the watch as I shot this video here. So I used a lot of apps and widgets, turned up the brightness and also used the always on mode. At the end of the day the watch still had 88%. It would therefore last for about 8 days. If I hadn't tracked 2 training sessions or hadn't used the watch quite as much in general, it would certainly have lasted even longer, but overall I'm very happy with the battery life in any case. During a 1.5 hour hike, the watch consumes about 7% for me personally. The Venu 2 Plus was Garmin's first real approach onto the smartwatch market. The watch was Garmin's first model with a built-in microphone and speaker which allowed playing music, having phone calls and most importantly using voice assistants. This was not yet possible with the Venu 2, but has now unsurprisingly been taken over to the Venu 3 as well. You can now play music directly from the watch, although you should not expect miracles from the sound quality of the speaker. But for example, if your phone is in your backpack, then you can accept calls with the watch and use its speaker and microphone to talk and listen to your counterpart. As for music, you have access to Spotify, Deezer and other platforms. You can control the music of your smartphone and you also have 8 GB of internal storage to download music onto the watch itself. And as mentioned, you can also use voice assistants. For this, the watch needs to be connected to your phone, and then depending on what voice assistant you use on your phone, the same will be used on your watch. And then you can tell the voice assistant to call some of your friends, or you can ask something like, "What's the weather today?"
The forecast is calling for rain today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 13 degrees, with overnight lows around 7.
Yeah, as you can see, using the voice assistant works pretty well. Another new smart feature is that alongside messages, the watch can now also display pictures thanks to its high-resolution AMOLED display. However, this only works for Android smartphones as Apple tries to keep this feature exclusive to the Apple Watch. The same applies to replying to incoming messages. So Android users can reply to messages with predefined texts and they can now even use a keyboard. I am an Apple user and unfortunately cannot use this feature and test it for you, but if you're an Android user you can use it. Another new feature is that you can now find Garmin's Connect IQ store directly on the watch, which will allow you to download additional apps onto the Venu 3. I also like the new shortcuts that you can use to activate the voice assistant or to jump to the most recently used apps. And talking about that, you can also access a list of the most recently used apps by swiping from the left hand side of the display, which is quite useful if you want to jump back and forth between widgets or if you generally use a certain widget over and over again. These two things definitely make the watch a bit easier to use. Overall, the Venu 3 is definitely Garmin's smartest watch that we have seen. What is missing in contrast to like real smartwatches like the Apple Watch or Samsung Galaxy Watch is the connectivity. So in order for all of these features to work, the watch needs to be connected to your phone. For example, the Apple Watch or Samsung Galaxy Watch are like small standalone smartphones if you choose the right version. This is not possible with the Venu 3, so it has to be connected to your phone. But if it's connected to your phone, the smart features are really very remarkable. The Garmin Venu 3 is of course not only a smartwatch, but even more so a fitness smartwatch or something in between a sports watch and a smartwatch. Let's therefore take a look at the other side of the coin, namely the sports and health features. Unsurprisingly, the watch can track something like your heart rate, breathing rate, your sleep, including sleep quality and the different sleep phases, or even your stress level. The body battery also shows you your remaining energy levels for the day. You can also use the health snapshot feature to track all of your most important health data at once. Basically, all you have to do here is to sit still for 2 minutes. The watch will then run a series of tests, and at the end, you'll see your heart rate variability, blood oxygen saturation, respiration rate, and stress. And speaking of heart rate variability, the HRV status is also new to the Venu 3, so it's the first time it's been used on a Venu watch. Heart rate variability basically describes the fluctuations between your heartbeat, because let's say your heart rate is at 60 beats per minute, then it doesn't mean that your heart beats exactly once every second, but sometimes there is a little more than 1 second between your heartbeats and sometimes there is a little less. These fluctuations are perfectly normal and very healthy actually, so a higher HRV status actually indicates good recovery and good health, and a lower HRV status can be an indicator for high stress. The HRV status that the watch shows you can either be balanced, unbalanced, low or poor. These values are simply meant to help you better understand how your body handles the challenges of your daily life, so how it recovers from workouts, deals with stress and so on. Especially when it comes to sleep, this also plays an important role. And talking about sleep, there are some new innovations as well. As mentioned, the watch can of course analyze your sleep or recognize the different sleep phases such as light or deep sleep. What is new now, however, is the sleep coach. How much sleep a person needs depends of course on many different factors, and in the end it's very different from person to person. The Venu 3 tries to take into account the most important factors like your age, your activities, your sleep over the last few days, naps during the day, as well as the HRV status just mentioned, and then the watch recommends the sleep duration for the upcoming night based on all of these factors. For example, after a very exhausting day or poor sleep in the night before, the recommended sleep duration could be somewhat higher. And as already mentioned, naps are now also analyzed. You can now take a short power nap for 30 minutes during the day, for example, and the watch will recognize this and include it into your recovery. You can then see, for example, how much your body battery has been recharged by this nap. With the body battery, you can now see exactly which events had an influence on it. So how much the battery has been discharged by workouts and how much you have recharged it by, for example, naps. Another new feature is the morning report, which we already know from many newer Garmin watches, but it was not yet on the Venu series. I find this really useful as it shows you the most important data for the day ahead. First of all, your sleep data, but then also the weather, your body battery, workout suggestions and so on. This gives you a quick look at what to expect in the morning. And the Venu 3 also offers audio-guided breathing and meditation exercises for your recovery, and there is also a new jet lag guide, so if you're traveling for a long time and your sleep pattern gets messed up, the watch tries to help you to reduce the jet lag. So yeah, all the health features are definitely very impressive on this watch, but also there are some nice training features. First of all, there are a few new training profiles, including e-bike and hand cycling, but most importantly, there is also a new open water swimming mode, which means that swimmers can now not only record their workouts in an indoor pool, but also in open water outdoors. Unfortunately, triathletes still have to do without a multisport mode. However, instead, Garmin has very well thought of wheelchair users, because for the first time there is now also a wheelchair mode in which something like pushes or weight shifts are tracked during the day, and there are also special integrated workouts for wheelchair users. This is definitely a nice advance on Garmin's side, even though as a non-wheelchair user I couldn't really test how helpful all these things really are. I can however comment on a few other new training features that I definitely think are very helpful. For example, there is a new interval training feature that was still missing on the Venu 2. You can now not only download structured workouts onto the watch via the app, but you can also set intervals directly on the watch. After the workout, you can also see the training effect, so how the workout affects your fitness, and also your suggested recovery time is indicated, which is how long you should ideally recover until the next workout. This was also not yet included in the Venu 2. What I also find is very useful is that the watch is now compatible with power meters for cycling. All of these new things are very welcome additions to the watch, and the training features are really remarkable, even though in this regard the watch definitely still can't compete with Garmin's higher end sports and outdoor watches like the Fenix, Epix or Forerunner watches. Because you should be aware that the Venu 3 is not meant for like professional athletes that want to analyze every single detail of their training. It is more aimed at the fitness and health conscious people that want to track the most important health data in their daily lives. For example, the Fenix 7 Pro can calculate something like running efficiency, ground contact time, live stamina data, lactate threshold or training load focus. These are certainly all very interesting data and facts, but the bottom line is that they are really only used by absolute data freaks, professional athletes or like very ambitious athletes. For the majority of people, however, the improved analysis of sleep, body battery and recovery is much more interesting, and this is exactly where the Venu 3 can shine. In combination with all of the nice smart features, it's perfect for daily use, but we will discuss that further in the conclusion. Of course, the Venu 3 can also track your heart rate directly at the wrist. A new heart rate sensor is used here, namely the 5th generation Elevate sensor, which is supposed to measure the pulse even more accurately with the help of more LED lights. The Vivo Active 5, which was released at the same time, still uses the 4th generation sensor, by the way. But is the new heart rate sensor really accurate? This is what I tested in dozens of my training sessions, and these are the results. Here you can see the results for the 1.5 hour hike that I mentioned earlier. The Venu 3 data in blue and the HRM Pro chest strap data in red. As we can see, both curves are almost identical, only towards the end there were 2 minor inaccuracies, but overall this is a really good measurement. If you've seen my video on the Vivo Active 5, you know that the results here were a bit less accurate. In this case, the Venu 3's average heart rate only deviates from the chest strap by about 0.3 beats per minute. Here we see the results for one of my running sessions, which was an almost perfect result. Both curves match very well, and also the average heart rate deviates by less than 1 beat per minute. This is the result for one of my gym sessions. As always, I had very low expectations here because strength training is very hard to track for an optical heart rate sensor. But here I was pleasantly surprised. In the beginning there were a few inaccuracies, but from minute 10 on the measurement was really very accurate. All heart rate increases were detected, and also the average pulse deviates by only about 2 beats per minute. So sure, it's still not a perfect result, but compared to other sports watches, one of the best results that I've seen. Another thing I always test for is the accuracy of the GPS, because if the GPS is inaccurate, such data as the distance or speed cannot be relied on either. What you should know is that the Venu 3 does now provide GPS, Galileo and GLONASS, but in contrast to the higher end Garmin outdoor watches like Fenix or Epix again, it does not provide multiband GPS. Multiband means that multiple frequencies of multiple satellites can be used at the same time, and according to some of my previous tests, this tends to produce slightly better results, but really only in extremely difficult environments like dense woods, and even then you will sometimes have a hard time to detect the differences. So how accurately does the Venu 3 record a track? Here you can also see the aforementioned 1.5 hour hike, which was partly through dense forests and partly through farming communities. The tracked route agrees very well with that of the Fenix 7 Pro with multiband. No corners are cut, now and then there were some minor inaccuracies. The distance deviates by about 1% with 6.11 kilometers compared to 6.05 kilometers with the Fenix, so overall I think we can be satisfied with this. Also here on a run through the city it looked really good, because here too both the curve and the distance agrees very well with the Fenix 7 Pro, and there are no negative abnormalities. As a further test, I went into the forest and walked the exact same way back and forth on narrow paths, so that the recorded route should ideally consist of 2 exactly superimposed tracks. Here we can see that the tracks are very close to each other, but I have already seen more accurate results, to be honest. For example, here you can see again the Vivo Active 5 in red, which is a bit more accurate, but you can also see the Polar Ignite 3 in green, which even has multiband but is still a bit less accurate. So the Venu 3 is somewhere in the middle. The GPS accuracy is absolutely fine, but not the best in my experience. Talking about GPS, you should also know that the Venu 3 does not provide maps. So you can use a simple directional arrow to navigate you to a specific location or your home, but you can't download tracks onto the watch and you just generally don't have access to topographic maps. So similar to the very advanced training features, you'd have to reach for other watches for those features as well, such as Garmin's Phoenix, Epix or Forerunner models. Alright, so what can we conclude about the new Venu 3? It is without a doubt Garmin's best fitness smartwatch so far. It offers the most smart features and the most health features for everyday use. It also provides a lot for the workout and outdoor sector, even though it is not on the same level as Garmin's top watches in this regard. However, it is not aimed at the absolute elite athletes, but at health-oriented and fitness-conscious people who are looking for a sports watch that can be worn 24/7 in their daily lives. However, in terms of price, it's also not on the same level as these top outdoor sports watches, but just half the price. And of course, the roughly $500 that you have to pay for the watch at the moment is not little, but for what the watch offers, it's definitely worth it in my opinion. Compared to the Venu 2, you can now make phone calls and use voice assistants, you have a much better battery life, an improved AMOLED display and many new features like the sleep coach, nap detection, recovery time, morning report, HRV status, interval training, open water swimming, wheelchair mode and much more. In many cases, upgrading from one model to the next is rather less worthwhile, but here it would definitely be worth it for me personally. There isn't the one new feature that would justify upgrading from the Venu 2 to the Venu 3 on its own, but the sheer amount of new features is very remarkable. However, of course, it all depends on whether these new features are important to you at all or not. So now let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the new Garmin Venu 3. If you found this video helpful or interesting, feel free to leave this video a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss any new videos in the future, you should definitely consider subscribing to this channel. But for now, thanks a lot for watching and see you next time.